Hi, and welcome back to Continual Fandom. Tonight we are taking a look at Sherlock Holmes' very own baby sister. It is none other than Enola Holmes. And so, before we dive too far down this rabbit hole this evening, let's find out who all has come to join us and talk about their love of the series. So, Samantha, you are up first.
Hi, I am Samantha Bryant. I'm best known as the author of the Menopausal Superheroes, unless you know me in real life, in which case I am best known for that chocolate chip banana bread I make. And for Enola Holmes, she was new to me when she was picked up by Netflix. So I've seen both the Netflix movies, but I have not yet read the books. But after seeing the Netflix movies, I'm very interested in reading the books.
Doc?
Hi, I'm Doc Coleman. I write steampunk comedy adventure. In fact, one of the influences for my series, The Adventures of Crackle and Bang, is actually the Sherlock Holmes stories. Well, not all of my stories are mysteries. I like the banter dynamic between the characters and having the main character actually not be the point of view a narrator for the story. So, but I've enjoyed both of the Enola Holmes Netflix movies, and there are books. When were there books?
Amy, how about you?
Well, Amy, I write as A.L. Kaplan, author of Star Touched and all these. I'm not going to read behind me because y'all can read, I hope. I have also seen the Netflix Enola Holmes. I have not read the books yet. They are on my to-read list because I really, really enjoyed the movies. But I do like Sherlock Holmes, watching it. I haven't read any of them, but I do like watching assorted versions.
Michael?
Hi, I'm Michael Ventrella. I write humorous adventure stories. My most recent was a steampunk story called Big Stick, which features Teddy Roosevelt and Mark Twain going on a wild adventure. So I love that time period. I also edited a bunch of anthologies, and two of them were Sherlock Holmes stories that I edited with Jonathan Mayberry, called The Baker Street Irregulars, is the name of that series of short stories. So I'm definitely into this sort of thing. I have read all of the Enola Holmes books. I have seen both of the films, and I actually interviewed the author on my blog about 2 months ago.
So, looking at Enola Holmes, it's set in that Victorian period. It is set definitively in kind of how we view the classical Sherlock Holmes. When we see the story, the Holmes that we see presented is actually the later books kind of Holmes. We're seeing the Holmes who's developed a little bit of empathy, who has a little bit more of that sense of feeling and being, which is actually funny enough. And Michael, you may weigh in on this. There was a lawsuit because the estate viewed that as an infringement because those were the books that hadn't yet entered the public domain. Now, the good news here is, as of January 1, all Sherlock Holmes stories are now in the public domain, which means that the TV shows and movies now have new material to work with. But looking at the stories, the period, and very much having kind of that offset of seeing somebody who has both that blend of the intelligence of a Holmes, but also you have the change in gender, you have the young girl, but you have that passion, that empathy, and seeing some of the familial play. So, Samantha, how did kind of the story set up for you with what you've seen in the film?
So, when I watched, I actually liked the second movie better than I liked the first one. And I think that's because so much of the first story was spent on just getting things set up. And a lot of it was really about her relationship with her brothers and not so much about her as a skilled detective. In fact, I was a little frustrated with how long she took to realize that her mom left her some clues. She just sat there being all mopey for way longer than I would have left her sitting there being mopey, given the kind of character she turned out to be once she started moving. So it didn't have the greatest start for me, but I think even though she sat around being mopey more than I wanted at the beginning, the performances really saved that for me. I very much enjoyed Helena Bonham Carter as her mom. She would be a wonderful, terrible mom, I think. And I was definitely pulled in by the speaking to the camera. That worked pretty well for me with this young adult version. I'm not sure I would want Sherlock Holmes to talk to me, but his sister talking to me was just fine.
How about you, Doc?
So repeat the question again. I want to make sure I'm answering your question, not her answer.
Well, kind of looking at, just the general setup, the age, time, the period, just overall, kind of how you walked into the series. What were your thoughts? What were your feelings on seeing it?
I've actually found it. I enjoyed the look at Victorian life from a woman's point of view, especially a woman who is not satisfied with her place in the world. And I suspect that actually happened quite a lot more often than people imagined. It was very interesting to see that and see the rivalry that she had with her brothers, basically having to try 2 or 3 times as hard to prove that she was just as good as any of them, because they were given advantages and she wasn't because of her gender. I definitely like the way it played out with her striking out and trying to build things her own way. Although I'm not quite sure about the time frame. We've talked about Sherlock as being portrayed as a later Sherlock who was more empathetic, and yet the character seems to actually be younger, almost like he's not yet become jaded and bitter. That he still has a little bit of youthful emotion before he sets into dour middle age. It is also interesting that it seems like the 2 youngest Holmes children definitely suffer from depression of some form.
Amy, how about you?
I really liked like Samantha mentioned, the interaction with the camera directly, and the way that Enola was introduced, her upbringing, the interaction with her mom. For me, it drew me in, and I got invested in the story. And at that point, I didn't know how quick she was on picking up clues. So the delay in finding some of those little clues didn't bother me as it may have some other people. But yeah, it was. I remember I watched it with my husband. I love YA, but this character just kind of drew me in there, and watching her step out into the world. And yeah, her mom taught her a lot of things, but not how to survive in society at all,
Mm-hmm.
which was kind of funny.
Michael, how about you?
Well, having read the books, I can tell you that the books are all in first person. So her talking to the camera makes a lot more sense. Her personality comes through quite a bit in the books, as you might guess. And the feminist undertones in the movie are definitely in the books, without a doubt, where she's fighting against society and how she has to dress and how she has to act. And the fact that she knows these things allows her to impersonate at various points. She can dress as a poor person and no one pays any attention to her and can't possibly imagine that she's Enola Holmes everyone's looking for, just because that's the way the classes are. So the books have a lot more feel for what the life was really like back in those days. She definitely did her research in that part. So I really enjoyed it, but the books depart quite a bit from the movies, as you might guess. That happens a lot. And I could talk about that if you want, but they'd be spoilers. So, if you want me to, I can mention a few things. But I think the film did it very well. I loved both of the movies, and I thought they did a really good job. But like I said, the second movie has practically nothing to do with the series. It's like it goes off in a completely different direction and has nothing to do with any of the books.
And so when you look, and so since you have read the books, what are your thoughts in terms of the difference between how the books approached it versus the films?
Well, the books were spread out. I mean, there's been 8 books so far. And for example, in the second, she knows no one's going to hire her as a woman. So she creates a fake person, a male, and she pretends to be the secretary giving him messages. Oh, he's not available today, but I can pass the message along. And then she does the investigation herself. In the books, Sherlock is searching for her like for 5-6 books, trying to find her, and she's constantly in hiding, and she's constantly upping him. So by the time she finally meets him by the end of the series, he's very impressed with her because she's solved things that he couldn't solve in all these books, which is a lot of fun because he gets so frustrated, and she does these things against him. So that part I really loved, and I wished they had done that in the film, because in the films, he's already friends with her by the second film, and it was more fun to see her working underground and behind the scenes and upping him and making him look foolish by figuring things out before he could. And that's part of the fun of the books. So hopefully you'll read the books, guys. And
that also sounds like it's more in the theme of the show, is that she's trying to prove herself against her older brother. And the fact, and she succeeds. Yeah.
Well, and to me, there's a lot of the themes here that we see in the original Sherlock Holmes stories, the rivalry between Sherlock and Mycroft, to now see her having the rivalry and the two of them looking, going, we've already got this thing done. We don't need to worry about you as we get into the fight. And watching the story, what do you think of the representation of Sherlock that we actually see on screen and in the books versus what we see in the original source materials? Because I am a huge fan of all things Sherlock and a lot of the different representations. But when you go through and read and you watch and see some of the development of Sherlock over time, and look and see how he gets represented in the books, knowing that this is YA, what are your thoughts looking at how they represent Sherlock and Mycroft in this and the relationship to her? So, Doc?
I was going to, like I said earlier, the Henry Cavill playing Sherlock seems like a young Sherlock, like kind of like he's in his stride and he's confident, and we're not seeing the bitter, drug-addled version of Sherlock that comes out in the stories, where he's overwhelmed by input. This Sherlock is in control of himself, and he's managing things. The cases are all a distraction for him, while in the book, the case was a way to give him something that let him screen out all the other inputs that he couldn't ignore. So a very, very different take on him. So that's a part of why I said earlier, it seems like, this is a glimpse at Sherlock before he kind of loses it.
Amy, how about you?
I agree. Since I've seen mostly movies of Sherlock in general, Sherlock did seem young to me, and definitely in more control of himself, and there was more empathy. So I didn't pick up on this is a later Holmes version simply because I haven't read those books, so I'm not as familiar with them. But yeah, he's smart. She's smarter. She doesn't have as much experience, but she's smarter and definitely more personable. He is still a loner because He doesn't know how to handle things. But you know, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed not having that cranky altered substance altered mind in there, just to see what, see him without all that stuff.
Yeah, and I don't think that that's necessarily something you could have done in YA that way anyway.
Right.
It would have been I think it would have been a hard thing to show that part of the motivation and his change. Then again, we could also be seeing it through the perceptions of a 14-year-old.
Well, for me, it was refreshing.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Michael? And especially because I haven't read the books, so.
Well, first of all, you have to realize that if she's 14 or 15 or whatever age, she is in the movies, she's a little older, I think, in the movies than she is in the books. He can't be really, really old because they're brother and sister, so he has to be a younger version of Sherlock just to make it have sense. The second thing I think is important is we have to sort of treat it like it's an alternate history in a way. They're using the character Sherlock, but it's an alternate Sherlock. The anthology series I did with Jonathan Mayberry was all alternate Sherlocks. Let's take Sherlock Holmes' character and make it different. And if you look at it that way, it makes a lot more sense. And let's face it, Sherlock is not a likable character. He isn't. He's an interesting, fun character, but he's not likable any more than, say, Hannibal Lecter is likable, but you still like to read about him. I mean, he's an interesting character, not a likable character. And I think it was important that they made him a likable character for this story to work.
Yeah, he's definitely more likable. Mycroft, however,
yeah.
Yeah. Boy, oh boy, he's a twit.
And Mycroft's supposed to be the really smart one.
Not in this one.
Yeah.
Samantha?
Yeah, I definitely think we got a softer side of Sherlock here than we've seen in other interpretations. But that's something I enjoy in a lot of Sherlock Holmes stories is he's different depending on who's portraying him, who's directing this story, what interpretation we've taken of him, but he's always interesting. And they really foiled him against Mycroft on this one, letting Mycroft be the guy who's the voice of boring propriety.
Mm-hmm.
She has no gloves. Like that's the worst thing ever. And so Sherlock right away felt like he kind of wanted to speak up, but he didn't really want to take on Mycroft. And it sounded like in their legal arrangements, Mycroft was actually you're the ward if somebody's taking care of you. Guardian. Thank you. I couldn't think of the word guardian. We are up past my bedtime. But yes, since Mycroft was the guardian, he didn't want to overstep until finally he does overstep and be like, how about if I be her guardian? But yeah, he seems a lot less egotistical. When she does things that he thinks are interesting, he had that cute little like, that was an impressed kind of noise. And I enjoyed that as, I think other interpretations of Sherlock I've seen would have been more put out or jealous or angry or something about that, feeling like she wasn't in her place. But this one was like, hey, my little sister's smart too. I like that. And that's the right tone for this kind of story. And after Mycroft being so very awful, it was good that Sherlock was not as awful.
Can I just say that in the books, that doesn't come about until like book 7 or 8. Which makes it a lot more believable because he has all these things keep happening, and little by little he starts admiring her more and realizing that she doesn't need care as much as they think she does. So it's a lot more layered and makes a lot more sense that it takes that long. But of course, it's a movie; they don't want to wait till movie 7.
The books are always more layered. Yeah,
the books are bonus material.
They will be for me in this case.
Yep.
You're paying Superman dollars for this. You got to get him on screen.
Yeah.
Yep.
So one of the things I actually thought was interesting was the motivation behind it. She turns 14 and mom disappears, but leaves a string of clues. And this is what inspires her to, of course, become a detective, is to find her mother. And I think, this is a very clear cut sort of motivation for her as a character, and to set the story, that idea of needing to help people and everything else, and also seeing what's happening both culturally at the time and everything else. So, Amy, as you were looking at the story, how do you think that relationship has played out so far between mother and daughter? How do you think that motivation works? How do you think, because again, Helena Bonham Carter obviously is also not a traditional woman of that Victorian period either. So looking at her, looking at the relationship, looking at the overall setup,
So, yeah, Mom is definitely not traditional in any shape or form. Just looking at the way she educated Enola, all the science and playing around inside and the fighting, and that those aren't things that in those days you would be teaching the young lady. She would have gone to finishing school. She would have learned how to embroider and sit up straight and not talk and be boring and bored out of her mind.
Mm-hmm.
But so the mom kind of she encouraged that young mind, brilliant mind, which was nice. It was nice to see the relationship they had. So when Mom suddenly disappears, of course, Enola's like, what's going on? That's definitely a good motivator for her to get out the door. So did Mom go off to do something specific, or was she trying to encourage Enola to step out? Although it would have been nice if she had taught her how to dress like a lady, how to walk like a lady, talk like a lady, dance, just so she could fit in a little better.
Mm-hmm.
Michael, how about you? What's your take on?
Well, there's two different takes because the book goes in a completely different direction from the movie. I really enjoyed the movie version of Mom, and I think in some ways it made more sense what happened in the movie without giving a spoiler about the books. In both the books and the movies, Mom did teach her all this stuff. That hasn't changed at all. The reason for Mom's disappearance is not the same in the books as it is in the movies. But I thought the movies did a wonderful job of explaining why Mom disappeared, and that whole subculture women's movement thing was a wonderful subplot that I really liked that isn't in the book. But it made more sense for Mom to be doing that, and I didn't have any problem with it whatsoever.
Samantha?
So we find out with Mom, I guess, that there are more dangerous things than just suffragettes, huh? And when I watched the first movie, and we get to the end and really see what Mom has been up to, that was one of the moments in the story that really startled me. I'm like, what are they trying to say here? Because we see that Mom had violent plans. And everybody's just kind of like, well, I guess that's Mom. Like at the end of the story, nobody's upset or trying to stop her from potentially blowing stuff up. And I'm not sure how I felt about that when I got there in the story. Just kind of like, I get that there were plenty of bad things. The society needs changing. There's definitely something that we heard over and over in the story, and it's true. And I kind of felt like the first movie wanted to have a bit of contrast between kind of different ways you can go about enacting change, and Enola's way is very different than her mother's, but it didn't stick that landing for me, because we just kind of laughed off Mom's potential killing of many people. But I did find it very fun to think that Mom has been funding her domestic terrorist activities with Mycroft's dollars, his very stolid conservative dollars, by telling him that she needs things for the house because he was never going to bother to check. And that had to be especially juicy for her to spend his dollars that way.
And Amy Lane is finally able to join us. Hey, Amy, you want to say
Hey.
hi and let everybody know who you are?
I'm Amy Lane. I've written a lot of books, and I watch a lot of TV.
And how did you come to discover Enola Holmes? Have you read the books? Have you seen the films?
I have not read the books. I didn't even know there were books, which, like I said, I watch a lot of TV.
You missed that whole thing earlier, so you.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
There are books. No.
There probably should be, which means that now that we know that, my husband and I will be listening to them on audio next. That's what happened with Three Pines. That's what happened with Longmire. And 9 times out of 10, the books are better. Then there's that always one odd one where it's like, oh no, the movie was way better. It popped up on our like Netflix queue because we like Stranger Things, and Millie Bobby Brown is in it. And sometimes the I want to say the feminist twist isn't a twist, and it gets really there are some really tiresome tropes that TV can fall into when they present you with, it's a feminist twist on Sherlock Holmes. This was not tiresome. This was delightful. This was, kid running off into adventure. Wonderful. So we saw the first 2 movies and enjoyed them very much. And like I said, now that I know there are books, I'm going to be looking. Hello, Audible.
Well, and part of what we're talking about right now is the journey where the relationship is between Enola and her mother. And the fact of her mother's disappearance is the inspiration. This is the inspiration for becoming a detective. This is the inspiration for really her call to adventure. So, any thoughts on, how that was for you? And
okay. And once again, I'm sorry, I've revealed myself to have a whole bunch of trope prejudices on these. The disappearing mother, I am not a fan of. I am not a fan of, my life is so dangerous that I am going to disappear and I'm not going to give you any explanation. And maybe it's because I've had 4 kids, only, 2 of them still live at home. But if I was so much as late from work or going on a business trip, I got a text once from my oldest daughter when I was gone that said, Mom, my little brother is naked and everything's on fire. And she wasn't wrong. The kitchen had caught fire. The kids were outside. I don't know at the time he was like 10 years old. I don't know what the 10-year-old was doing running around the house without clothes. But, and it's not because my husband is incompetent. That's a stereotype I resist strongly. It's because kids are a lot. And a thoughtful mother, someone who is going into domestic terrorism, someone who had raised Enola with such care and with such detail, would have known that you don't just go off and leave your curious, questing, resistant to authority child without expecting, some serious, oh shoot, I don't know. I wasn't on the original Wheel of F's.
You're behaving.
Yeah, y'all know what I'm talking about. Without expecting some serious chaos to result. Okay, particularly the brighter the kid, the bigger and more replete the chaos. Okay, the naked little brother and the fire. Okay, that was not the result of a stupid child.
I was going to say it sounds like something I'd do, but
right. What fun they could have had if she had stayed. Where the amazing places they could have gone, the amazing things that mother could have, oh my goodness, she could have taught that kid to grift, to pickpocket, to build explosives.
So if I can springboard off this, because I haven't answered this question
Yes,
yet.
you were coming up next anyway.
Yeah. So I was just thinking about in the source material, it always described Sherlock's parents as being ordinary plotting people who were out of their depth trying to deal with their brilliant children. Of course, that is basically how Dr. Watson relayed what Sherlock told him. And then look at Enola Holmes in that light. That the idea that, okay, this is Sherlock, this is their mother, and Sherlock considers her plotting. And yet she's off, doing domestic terrorism and outsmarting her oldest and most genius child, because he literally cannot be bothered to check up on her as a concept.
I did wonder, because we didn't really get any like flashbacks to her raising the boys,
Right.
And so I did wonder if there'd been a shift, if she raised her daughter differently than she raised her sons, if she'd been more pedestrian in the past and then something happened and she became more galvanized, or the fact that it was her daughter made a difference because, feminism.
If the trauma of dealing with the boys kind of opened her mind to different ways of doing things.
Right. And Dad's not in the picture. So, did all of this change after he died? And suddenly she had some freedom? I've known more than one widow who has lived quite differently after her husband was not in the picture anymore.
Yeah.
But it also brings the question of once you get the mother to the point where she's thinking new thoughts and creating her plans and wanting to go out and change society, given the kind of things we've seen from her boys, isn't it then likely that she left Enola on her own as a test? I mean, that's definitely the kind of thing Sherlock would do, is just abandon her to see what she would do. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think the story makes it clear if, at least the first movie, if that was her motivation or not. She comes back and she kind of offers a wishy-washy apology, but she doesn't explain herself. She doesn't say like, no, there was an emergency, I had to go blow stuff up. She doesn't say that it was a test and you passed with flying colors, darling. She just doesn't explain.
At the same time, she did provide for her daughter by having, money there for her hidden away so that, she could find it, and made it sort of a fun game for her, which is kind of interesting way of doing things. But maybe it's just a test. Is she smart enough to deserve this money that I've hidden away for her? Mind you, I'm trying to be quiet about what the books do because it's completely different.
Well, and
I could see her as a woman who regards child rearing as experimentation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, if there was an internet thing, like a Twitter thing about 2 years ago, about a guy who had a hungry kid, and so he gave the kid a can opener, and 6 hours later his kid was still trying to open a can of beans. And there were a whole lot of parents who wanted to beat him to death with cans of beans. Because you don't do that to a kid. And I gotta say, if this was a test, I kind of want to beat her to death with a can of beans. That's okay.
Yeah, it's not a nice thing to do to a kid. No,
that is not a nice thing to do to a kid. And
in all the flashbacks we saw of their relationship, it didn't seem like that was how they were set up. It didn't seem like Mom was constantly setting her test and giving, she didn't have that anxiety about their relationship that would come if you're always being tested and seeing if you come up to par. She just had genuine open affection for her mother. So I just don't really buy that that was their relationship. So this was a real shock to her.
Yeah. And like you said, there is, because they present Enola as being forthright and very, this is not a child who is used to being hurt. This is not a child who is used to being rejected or told that she doesn't measure up in any sense of the word. If you're being tested all the time, you're not secure enough to go out and do the things that Enola did.
Well, and actually from what I've seen of it, and I don't know how the books handled it, I actually saw it as where her mother raised her with a free hand, which meant she was willing to take a lot more risks than you would see, which means without also necessarily understanding all the potential implications and consequences, but understanding that her mother gave her a ton of tools to deal with the challenges that would come, but not necessarily didn't create those boundaries to create that fear, was a lot of the way I saw it. And the other thing that I did have in the back of my mind is at 14 at that time, that's very different from a 14-year-old now.
Yeah.
Was expected to get married by the time she was 16 or so, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
Or sooner.
Or sooner. So, I mean, so in terms of how we look at the two different times. Now, one of the other things that I, when I was watching the series, I thought was an interesting play and an interesting callback to more of the Sherlock mythos. A big part of the Sherlock mythos is, of course, the Baker Street Irregulars. That idea of having this network. And this is one of the first things that she almost accidentally does is joins that level of people on the street, people that are living in hiding as a part of being in hiding, part of living that way and being able to instantly take over and create almost that kind of a network, which is one of the things that makes her that level of effective. Any thoughts on that? And any wondering if her network and Sherlock's cross paths frequently? And I wonder if that's in the books.
It is. But
she always had to be.
She always tricks him. He doesn't recognize until after she's gone, going, wait a minute, that was Enola, and it's too late,
Since in the second movie she had the Match Girls group that she got involved with, I kind of expect that that's a lead into sort of a Baker Street Irregulars kind of group. And since they had Enola basically send Watson to Sherlock in this version of things, I wonder if she's also going to connect him with that network. Because, it's not clear. We know that Sherlock is already famous, but it's not like they said, this is Sherlock after he solved these cases and before he solved these cases. It's, at least in the films, it is not that specific. So we've got room. And like Michael was saying, you definitely have to regard it as an alternate history. This is a different version and doesn't necessarily match what you might think of as canon from other ones.
In the books, he's already famous because Watson has written the story. So to have Watson suddenly show up at the end of movie 2, maybe go, wait a minute, I thought Watson was always around. So it's a little different. Yeah.
Any other thoughts on like the Baker Street Irregulars side of things, Michael?
No, like I said, in the books, there's much more of it, as you might guess. She has certain connections that she makes over time that appear in book after book after book that she uses, just like the Baker Streets would. And she also does a lot of, well, actually that's in the movies too, where she watches and sees like delivery boys delivering things and stuff. That is in the movies, right? Am I getting my movies and books confused?
She did spend a lot of time offering people money to change clothes with her.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Did she go into, a screened in spot to change those clothes? I always wondered how that worked.
I wonder why she just didn't buy some men's clothes when she was buying all those fancy women's clothes. Buy them both.
Yeah.
Nancy Springer, when I interviewed her, was she said one of the things she really didn't like about the first movie is that they had her dressed up as a boy. She said that was so cliche. That wasn't in the book. They shouldn't have done it. She didn't like that cliche.
But it worked.
Yeah.
It worked on screen.
So, Amy, any thoughts from you about her take on the Baker Street, kind of the network she forms?
Which Amy?
Oh, Lane. Sorry, I'm kind of working back in order.
I have okay. Actually, I'm back at the Match Girls because I saw what was it, Ripper Street, and they had a very different take on the Match Girls, what their faces looked like as they were, and how it killed them, and that was horrific. So I have to say I was kind of glad they didn't do that for Enola Holmes because the Ripper Street version just stuck with me. As for the Baker Street Irregulars, I think one of the things that humanized Sherlock Holmes in the original, Arthur Conan Doyle, was that he actually was human to the irregulars. That he helped helped keep them fed, helped keep them clothed, treated them as equals in information gathering, and was human to them when he was not necessarily human to people in his own class. And I mean, it makes sense to use them in a different context in Enola, right? It makes sense to make her, a gammon urchin, running around the street being, gathering information because she has a purpose and she has all this education behind her. But it also does, it makes him less human. It makes Sherlock Holmes less human to put the onus of the Baker Street irregulars on his adorable little sister.
Samantha, any more thoughts on the irregulars?
No, I did very much like the Match Girls, especially the littlest one who came in and hired her. Sorry, I've forgotten the character's name. But so if they make more of these, and I hope they will, I would love to see that little girl come back and be part of her network and introduce her to lots of other people. I think that could be a whole lot of fun.
Doc?
In a certain way, as if you're doing any kind of intelligence gathering in Victorian England, you've got to have something like the Baker Street Irregulars, because that's very much a nature of the class structure of the time, that one, that people don't see the servants. And if they don't see the servants, then they definitely don't see the poor. So these become the people and the guises that can get you into anywhere. I think, especially in the second movie, she used that to very good effect. Especially when I'm trying to remember, doing the tracking down of the girl in the theater. It's like, dress as a servant. You go in, you go through, and it's like, okay, you've got to keep the paws of the patrons off of you, but otherwise people just accept it. You're wearing the right clothes, you must belong here.
Yep, got the uniform.
Yep.
I'm
sorry, go ahead, Amy.
I think Enola's youth makes it possible for her to do that a little more. Young people put a little dirt on their face. Nobody really looks too close to see if they have all their teeth. I am also infatuated with Miss Scarlet and the Duke. Do I have any watchers of that? It's on PBS. If you haven't seen it, it's on season 3. It's great. But she's full grown Victorian lady, and the Duke is his first name is Duke, and he's an inspector with actual inspector with the constabulary, and they run into some very, very specific class and gender disparities in this show. And I think that Enola, because of her youth, because of her rather free experimental thinking mother, and her ability to get away with not wearing a corset, okay, she gets to do a lot of things that a Victorian adult woman would not at this point.
Yeah, the story definitely has taken a side of which aspects of society are worse to be a woman in. And it's definitely decided that being a ritzy woman is the worst end of the stick. That it's her brother who's shocked that she doesn't have gloves and wants to send her off to boarding school, finishing school, as they said. And you remember in the second movie when she's so shocked to find out that she can't talk to this young man without a chaperone. She's like, She didn't say for reals, but that was definitely
Yeah.
the feeling. Like, for reals? Are you serious? Yeah.
Okay, random point about the second movie. Was anybody impressed by the size of that bathroom?
Yeah.
He taught her how to dance in a bathroom the size of my house.
Well, if multiple women were in there trying to, primp, they needed room for the dresses.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
They're not the biggest dresses in the history of dresses, but they were still some pretty impressive dresses.
Lots of layers. But you mentioned the corset that she didn't like to wear, but in the movie she did put it on, and it did save her life.
This is true.
Yeah, there's some good things to all that whalebone armor.
That is in the book.
Oh, it is in the book. Okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because that makes sense.
There is something to be said about the corsets and the whalebone of the time being better than some of the armor at the time.
When they're not
You couldn't
displacing your
breathe.
internal organs, they're great.
Yeah, cutting off your air supply. It's like, no wonder women were always fainting. Couldn't breathe.
So, and we've talked a lot about Enola. We've talked a lot around what she did, the family, the environment. We even touched a little bit on the cases and the casework, but really haven't dove into her. How she's set up as a character, how she handles investigations, her demeanor, and really who she is. So, Amy, for you, who is Enola Holmes? How do you like how she handled the investigations? The set of Amy Lane.
I like her seeing the point A, point B, shortest distance between 2 points. And not every character does that. Some characters go out of their way to scroll, hey, if I do this and this and this and this. I do like her forthrightness. I do like her willingness to work for the little guy. Of course, we all like the willingness to work for the little guy. I think she got from her mother an absolute lack of schooling in Victorian hierarchy. So she didn't know she was supposed to wear gloves. She didn't know that you had to have a chaperone.
She didn't know she was supposed to look down at certain people.
Yeah, she didn't know she was supposed to look down on certain people. I think we were just talking about the Baker Street Irregulars. I think that will make her establish her little network so much easier. Although I do think there are going to be people from the lower classes who are going to run away from her screaming, because getting entangled with the gentry could get you a whole lot of trouble if you get caught talking to someone that you're not supposed to. And she's not going to be on the receiving end of that trouble, because she's on the higher end of that, and she doesn't care that she's looked down on. I would like to see if she gets if she has any doors closed in her face because of who she talks to and who she champions, because I think that could happen. That, standing up for the little guy often loses you any, your bread and butter patrons. It's going to lose you some access to the places that might help you combat the little guy. Right now, she has it. She's of the perfect, she can put on the corset and do her hair, and she can go to the cotillion and pass even for a little while. But it's, she's going to have to find some other networking skills, I think. And I'm interested to see how she does that.
Samantha?
Thinking of her networking skills you were talking about, I enjoyed that, she got the dancing lesson in the bathroom, and then she reciprocated with a fighting lesson in a carriage. And that was fun. Although she did a lot better at learning to dance quickly than he did at learning to fight quickly. So as far as Enola herself, I liked her spirit, and I definitely plan to read the books because I think I would enjoy seeing a deeper version of the character. I enjoyed the moments with her where she gets to shine, like where she was in in the second movie when she's going over a crime scene with Sherlock, and they're pointing things out to each other, and we get to see her skill that way. And in the first movie, her crazy plan for getting away from the guy in the bowler hat on the train that actually works, and so I think, there's a lot of potential for this character. I would definitely like to see more of her. And I hope that they continue to deepen and let her grow and, continue to make good stuff with her.
Doc?
Actually, the dynamic that intrigues me is her relationship to the young lord that she saves on the train. Yeah, Hoops. Thank you. I could not remember the name. And I remember watching the end of the second movie where they basically admit that there is a certain amount of affection between the two. I could just see it's like, okay, this would actually be an interesting other direction to go into in having them actually marry and play government and society games. It's like, yes, we know Mycroft is in the government, but he's much more of a behind the scenes spy master. But to actually have a lord and his lady that everyone dismisses because she's young and she's pretty, and just all kinds of national intrigue that you could get in there just seems like an intriguing way that the story could potentially go. Probably not the way it actually does in the books, but it just sounds like an interesting alternative.
Amy Kaplan.
Yes. I think the original question is, how does she go about her approach to investigation, or somewhere along that?
How does she go? But what do you think of her? How she goes about investigation, and really who she is?
I enjoyed the way she goes. She has an innocence about her because she hasn't been exposed to society as much, or even other people. I mean, I got the impression that she grew up without interacting with other people, just her mom. And so she doesn't see dangers where most people would know to look for them. She's very innocent in the way she goes about things. But then she also sees other things that most people don't notice. So I did enjoy that. Like even with the young lord, she doesn't see any. She's trying to kick him out of the train thing room because that's her cabin. He doesn't belong there. They're both running away. I found that refreshing and fun, and I like the way she went about things. For her character, moving on, she now knows by the end of the movie that her mom taught her a lot of things, but there are huge gaps in her education. I'd like to see her, and I don't know if it happens in the books, that she takes upon herself to learn some of these things that she hasn't been taught. Like, she had her little friend there teach her how to dance. And hopefully she's realizing now that, maybe I do need to learn how to walk like a lady and do some of these other things so I can fit in and do my investigations a little bit better. She is smart. She is very smart. So she's got to figure this out. And I'm curious to see how that unfolds moving on.
So, Michael, since you have both the films and the books to pull upon, what do you think of our hero?
Oh, she's a wonderful character. And actually, I found out that Millie Bobby Brown, who plays the character, had read the books loved it, and that's how the movies got made. She went to her agent and said, I want to make this into a movie, and I want to play the main character. So she already loved the character and wanted to play the character, which is always good, because you want an actor who is not going to say, I love this character and I'm going to play it my way. No, she's playing it like the books, which is wonderful. And I think that makes it a lot more fun. And you read the books, it is definitely the same character. I think one of the fun things in the books and in the movies is that she never does get it always right. You know, she thinks she knows how to fit into society, but she screws up because she doesn't get it right. She gets it so close. And that's part of the fun of it, of course, you know, because if the hero does everything right all the time, there's not much of a plot, you know, things have to go wrong or else there's no plot. So she, that's part of the fun of it. And I hope they will keep that up in the movies like they did in the books.
Yeah. If you don't make poor choices, I mean, you can't be the hero.
Yeah.
If everything goes right for the hero, that's boring. Things got to go wrong, you know?
Sort of like walking up to some guy without a chaperone.
Yeah.
You don't know any better.
Yep.
Well, like Doc and Amy were talking about her relationship with Tewksbury. I think that's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That, you know, both of them are not doing necessarily what people think that they should do, and all of that. So I think it'll be fun if they continue that.
Now,
and you know, he'll have pressure in his position to be more proper, but he already loves this girl who's never going to be proper, and they can cause very fun and interesting chaos together.
I love the characters in the books. In the first book, Tewksbury is like 12 years old, and then you never see him again. So I like the fact in the movies they aged him and made him a love interest. It adds a lot.
Well, everybody, I think we have stacked up everybody's not only to be watched, but to be read piles. Because I've seen a couple of people going ahead and buying them on Kindle while we were sitting here. But before we get out of here, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys. So website, social media, and if, of course, you've got that latest book to push as well. Or you've got something in the Holmesian world as well you want to let everybody know about. So Samantha, how about you?
I have not written anything with Sherlock Holmes, but I do write difficult or complicated women, depending on which side of their ire you're falling down on, in the Menopausal Superhero series. And you can find me at samanthabryant.com, and I play around on lots of different social media, mostly as Samantha B. Writer, just the letter B in the middle, or you can search for Samantha Bryant author. Make sure you put the author, or you're going to get an actress, and I just don't really do high heels and ball gowns.
Doc?
Okay, you can find my stuff by going to your favorite search engine and putting in Doc Coleman Steampunk, and that will take you to my website at doccoleman.com. It will also help you find my Amazon author page, where you can see all the works that I've currently got published. And come April, I should be in an anthology coming out called A Cast of Crows, that involves a steampunk look at, an Edgar Allan Poe flavored look at steampunk worlds. And later this year, I should be publishing the second book in The Adventures of Crackle and Bang, which will be The Kindred of Kali. So look for that too.
Ms. Kaplan.
You can find me at alkaplanauthor.com. That's my website, and A.L. Kaplan author on pretty much any other social media, except TikTok. I'm not there. I have not gotten to that yet, but yeah, A.L. Kaplan author. You can find me there, and check out my books.
Michael?
I'm at michaelaventrella.com, and if you go there, that's where my blog is as well. And if you're interested in reading my interview with Nancy Springer, who wrote the Enola Holmes books, that's there and easy to find once you get on there. And there's also a link to all my books, which include, since we're talking Sherlock Holmes, 2 books I edited with New York Times bestseller Jonathan Maber. I have to put that New York Times bestseller in there. He insist.
Contractual obligation.
Yes, it has to be there. Called the Baker Street Irregulars series, where we got a bunch of different famous science fiction authors to write alternate Sherlock Holmes. What if Sherlock Holmes was an alien? What if it's a small girl? What if it was a medieval? That sort of thing. So we had a lot of fun with different Sherlock Holmes stories. If you like that kind of thing.
And Ms. Lane.
Muted, Miss
You're
Lane.
on mute.
Good thing you were muted.
That's time to drop that one. This.
Yes.
See, whether or not I get it on the wheel, it's always me.
More with less feeling. No.
Okay, yes, I'm no longer. By the way, I have a fast mute trigger because I've got dogs, and I don't want you to have to listen to my dogs when they suddenly decide, oh my God, there's a 900-pound gorilla in the backyard. It's a cat. Anyway, you can usually find me on Amy Lane Anonymous. It's my Facebook group, or generally Facebook. You can also find me at Amy Lane Romance, which is my website, and that usually tells you what's coming out next. My most recent release is The Tech, and it is book 5 and what I like to call gay leverage. The Long Con series, and which is a lot of fun. I like writing heist books. I like writing romantic suspense. If the market wasn't saturated, I might put my hat in the ring for a cozy. But there's a gazillion of them, so I'm like, Anyway, so I'm automatically anything like Enola Holmes with, hey, it's set in the past. It's got an irrepressible heroine or hero, and it's mystery suspense. Candy.
And I've had the pleasure of being your host tonight, Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com, the speculative fiction academy.com, creatingprose.com, and of course here at ConTinual. And we will see all of you guys again soon.